Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Latimer. We're here live at Midas Letter RAW in the Exchange Tower, downtown Toronto, and I'm here with Ed Milewski. Welcome, Ed.
How you doing? How you doing?
Great. Doing fantastic.
Lots of action today. You know, mostly
Lots to talk about.
Mostly negative action that I can see.
Just look at that chart. We've got
The heat map.
The heat map.
Yeah, the heat map's got some heat going.
Looks fiery red.
It is not much. You know, I just saw Kronos go by.
Yeah.
We talk about it almost every day. It's down $1. It's not, you know, from now 13.5 to 12.5, like
Right.
something like that. 31 and change on Canopy. The S&P's down 25 points, which is a little bit less than 1%. And gold moving up. Gold moves up, markets move down. Markets move down, gold moves up. Interest rates move down. Looks like gold moves up. Marijuana stocks look like shit.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just
ugly out there.
Well, you know, I mean, they're starting to get into areas where, like, although there was one I saw today, Ignite.
Ignite.
We're gonna put some charts up later, but I'm just sort of giving a little and BlackBerry.
teaser.
Remember the iconic BlackBerry?
I do. I think a lot of people had Blackberries one day.
I did, and you know, BlackBerry was the original. Like, that was the phone. I mean, the president of the United States had a BlackBerry, you know, at some point.
Yeah. BlackBerry was.
But they missed, and the stock's down $2, down to about 20% today. It was about $18 6 months ago. We'll put up a chart later, but there's some ugly things going on.
Lots to talk about. Well, we've got a great show today. We've got, why don't we pull up what we have on the show? We're going to be doing the news, obviously, with Laura. Laura McCallum is going to be doing the news, and then I'm going to have a sit down with Alessandra Bruno, our financial writer,
Yeah.
and a friend of mine, Daniel Sachs, a smart guy with Sensi
And
Properties.
you used to work with this gentleman?
Yeah, it would have been over a decade ago now, and he's in cannabis real estate, and we had a good chat, so we'll be...
When you say cannabis real estate, you're talking about land that would be used to grow cannabis mainly?
More taking the real estate off the books for the companies. He believes that real estate or cannabis companies aren't in the business of real estate and therefore should be not owning that real estate.
So they should rent it,
Essentially.
or lease it, or whatever the proper.
Some kind of different arrangement, but...
right, but they shouldn't be speculating on the price of land.
Well, I think it frees up a lot of the assets that they have.
Yeah,
You've got a lot of that money tied up into the real estate.
Yeah.
And a lot of these areas that these companies buy real estate, their money, you know, if an investor wants to get a return on that money, just holding on to that land in, you know,
Right.
Timbuktu somewhere might not get you the returns you want. So, interesting talk.
Yeah. The 10-year rate, which got to 1.9 from 1.42, so big move up.
Yeah.
Last week or so, or week and a half, it's now back down to about 168. So
168.
So from 142 to 190 to 168. So you can see big move when it looked like rates were going higher. Now that, you know, maybe the powers they've decided, you know, we can't let rates go too high, so they've done whatever they had to do, you know, to stop rates from. Stelco was going to raise some money. Okay, Stelco, which is the big steel company.
Yeah.
They came out and said they wanted to raise $300 million by way of a debenture. This was announced a few days ago, and today they said, you know what? Conditions aren't right to raise money right now, so we're going to wait. In other words, couldn't raise the money. Because if you're looking for money and you say, oh, well, wait, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Waiting for a better term? Well, better terms maybe. What if better terms don't come? But clearly, the market for raising money and there's a lot of this is dried up.
Well, I was reading interestingly that the markets right now, or what's going on with the Feds, is very similar to 2007 before the crash.
Yeah.
You think that we got a crash coming?
You know, I mean, I remember when they start talking about these toxic things back in 2007. I went to go look at a nickel property up in Sudbury. We were on a private plane, little seaplane, and we were going up to. And I was sitting with a gentleman who was a very smart guy, and he said, "This isn't good." I mean, look, I don't know what's going to be the problem, but it's when the money's in an area, and that money can't sustain itself, like these toxic. I can't remember the word they used, but it was all about how they packaged real estate, and anyway, it became a disaster. I mean, the world blinked. If we're back to that sort of situation, inverted yield curve they mentioned, right?
Yeah. It just crossed.
Yeah. No. This is you got to pay attention here. Yeah, for sure. But we're gonna look at some charts later.
Yeah, and a good thing to do is keep up with the news. So why don't we see what Laura has to say?
Good.
Here's what's making cannabis news this Tuesday, September 24th, 2019. AFRIA announced the launch of its cannabis education program, AFRIA Educates. This program is mandated to educate Canadian adults on responsible and safe use of all cannabis products legally available now and in the future. AFRIA educates with Drug-Free Kids Canada. The panels will focus on furthering awareness around the potential harms of cannabis for youth and help parents navigate the ever-evolving Canadian cannabis landscape. Aleafia Health provided guidance anticipating the company will achieve positive net income for the 3-month period ended September 30th, 2019. The company reported their balance sheet as $51 million in cash on hand and now have over 10,000 active registered patients. Charlotte's Web Holding announced that the Vitamin Shop, an omni-channel specialty retailer of nutritional products, has commenced selling the new line of Charlotte's Web CBD hemp extract infused CBD gummies in 738 stores across 45 U.S. states. Charlotte's Web gummies are made with whole plant extract from its hemp genetics, featuring synergistic functional ingredients to support specific health-related functions. Chemistry Technology provided an update on the company's Washington State asset. Chemistry has received a strongly positive report from the general manager of its Washington State licensee partner, reporting a 30% increase in sales increase from April, a 36% increase in crop yield from April, and a 100% increased retail client stores from April. Dixie Brands has extended for 1 year the expiry date of 27.2 million share purchase warrants issued on October 1st, 2018, in conjunction with the company's non-brokered private placement of 25 million. Each warrant entitles the holder to purchase one subordinate voting share of Dixie at an exercise price of $1.32 per share. Ianthus Capital Holdings announced the company's board of directors has converted all of the issued and outstanding Class A convertible restricted voting shares to common shares. The conversion of 13.56 million Class A shares into 13.56 million common shares has been completed and filed as required with SEDI. There are no remaining Class A share outstanding. Jushi Holding announced the closing of the company's acquisition of the majority of the membership interest in Delisto. Delisto is a Virginia-based pharmaceutical processor for medical cannabis extracts and is currently one of only 5 applicants to receive conditional approval for a permit issued by the Virginia Board of Pharmacy to cultivate and process medical cannabis. The aggregate purchase price for the approximately 62% of the membership interest in Delisto is approximately $16 million USD. MediPharm Labs has signed its first private label sales agreement to export to Europe with Adrex Pharma. Adrex Pharma is a leading licensed wholesale distributor of controlled drugs and medical cannabis, which can serve all of the approximate 20,000 pharmacies across Germany. MediPharm Labs will supply Adrex Pharma with cannabis derivative products for sale and distribution in Germany upon receipt of applicable regulatory approvals. Neptune Wellness Solutions announced new customer relationships for which the company is expected to provide hemp-derived finished form products and bulk extracts processed at Neptune's U.S. extraction facility. The company is also in discussion with several other customers for additional opportunities in the U.S. market. And that's your news for today. For all of the latest cannabis news and stock information, visit the Cannabis Daily on MidasLetter.com.
So that's the news. What do you think we're going to do now? I think we're going to get right to the meat of it, right? We got a big show, and not going to have a lot of time later, so
okay.
I'm thinking we look at charts.
Okay, so I got the the Midas Letter indices up here, and
Okay.
the big one, and I'm just going to talk about the big index that we have. I think there's 8 or 9 companies in this index, down 6% today. And if you look, and this is the chart here, it's now in the last today, it's taken out the low of maybe 3 weeks ago. And you can see that, like that last candle.
Yeah.
That's bearish. Okay, that's bearish. Now, just so you know, it back in here, back in January, did the same thing. It looked like it was taking it out, and I don't know if, and then it rallied big. So we're so oversold. I'd be on the lookout for a rally, but I'm not going to step in there and try and predict a rally. I'd rather wait to see evidence of it.
Right.
And so the small cap cannabis index is down 4.6%. The CSC Canadian Cannabis Index is down 5.22. The Canadian Venture Cannabis Index is only down at 1.87, but they're all down. I know we got I'm going to put up the S&P here. And I take a look at the S&P, which is, we're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. The S&P concludes everything.
I've got our live chat room open, and we've got some of our regulars here. Faye Smith, hello. Mark Pepper, how are you? Reefer Aljoint is here. Always great to have our chat room live and active. If there's a particular stock you'd like Ed to take a look at, we can't obviously look at everything, but please feel free to put your questions in there or the ticker, and we'll see if we have time for it.
So let's just take a look at the S&P. So today we got a big red candle over here, which I don't like because it's now moving away from this area here, which it looks like it's now a bit of resistance. And the negative thing in all this, of course, is that this high here was almost reached, but it wasn't.
Right.
And tell every technician in the world will say, now you got to watch this. If this can't get going and this starts to roll over, these lines start rolling over, what you really got to watch out for is if I drew that line correctly, it doesn't matter, but there's a line there of support. All that support makes you want to go have a Sapporo. Anyway,
you've been saving that one.
Hey, look. All I'm saying is, and today with markets reeling,
yeah,
and I didn't spend a lot of time listening to, were there anything specific? Are interest rates dropping? I believe they're dropping today. And while we're hot here, let's take a look at gold, the big ETF. Just see what that's doing. Okay. Because that, as we know, last few days, gold's been, so here we are. And so remember we talked about, we had, 10 out of 11 days were red candles on the GLD, and then we had 3 greens. And they tried to sewer gold. Look at these 3 here. We're slowly making our way up to this sort of pivot point.
Yeah.
And I, and maybe we're getting close, maybe not. Point is, what's moving? Markets are not doing well. Marijuana stocks aren't doing well. Gold's doing well.
I'm just looking at the volume there. There's not no spikes or anything like that.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know how to read the volume on ETFs because,
Big bar, a lot of volume. Small bar. No? Am I wrong?
I don't know.
That's what it looks like.
I know that, obviously money's moving into gold. And just a little while ago, about 45 minutes ago, I noticed that interest rates looked like they were rising quickly.
Yeah. And
gold was dropping quickly. Just on a short, on a day trade kind of situation. Okay. So let's, we got time for one more here?
Yeah, I think so.
Or 2 more?
Yeah, we can do a couple.
Okay, so let's look at the interest rate scenario here.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. So recall we talked about, just a minute. So there was the low in interest rates, which is higher than the low that occurred 2.5 years ago. And we had a nice run, a monster run, as a matter of fact, in interest rates, which knocked the shit out of gold. this is all tied in. But since then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days later, 7 trading days, got a big red candle, and rates have gone from this level here of about 1.90, and we're now about 162. So there's back and forth, lots of back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to play. I mean, look, the way it looks now, if rates keep going down because the things look ugly, then gold's going up. Now, if for some reason, if the people don't want to be buying bonds and they start selling bonds, which will cause rates to go higher, gold is probably going to get hit. Anyway, that's sort of a synopsis of the 3 main categories. I thought maybe take some time here. We got some time to look at some specific marijuana charts.
Yeah, we can pull up. I'm just in the chat room here, and maybe LHS. Brock wants to see LHS. ACB, of course.
Well, I got ACB right here. Okay, so here we go. Look at this. And these are all 3-month charts, by the way. So we're trying to keep it relatively. We had a big run here. We got to slightly oversold. Sorry, overbought. We got the candle through, and then right away they came up with some news that didn't I recall didn't sit well, and we've been just on a downward, and now look at
a big
look at that red candle. I mean, that's the opposite of that bullish candle.
Yeah, this is the bearish Marabuzzo candle.
Marabuzzo. Okay. Yeah, and you know what? Let's take a look at a 6-month chart. So we're at a 6-month low, and what about a 1-year low? No, we're not at a 1-year low yet, but we're getting here. Sorry,
it's pretty close.
Well, it's getting close. It's really close. It's right there. We about double bottomed. Got all the way back up here. Look.
Well, that big red candle suggests it's going to go down a little more.
Well, or that when you get that last candle at the end.
Yeah.
If it's at the beginning of a down move, I'd say continuation. But when you start to see that, that's a panic candle. When you get panic, you get close to a change in direction. Because maybe just about everybody that's going to sell. Once the sellers are out, then there's nobody there to sell it and knock it down.
Could be change of direction.
Yeah. The one other one I want to look at is Kronos, because Kronos is sitting with all this huge stockpile of cash. Look at this. This thing's back to $12.50, down $1. Look at this. A year ago, this is what? Sorry, 7 months ago. Look at this. 30 low 30s. Now you can have all you want for $12.60. That's a haircut. If I had hair, well,
not the haircut you want. What about Juju?
Okay,
can we take a look at that?
Yeah, Juju was up from 2 to 2.5 today. Cents.
Yeah.
Take a look here.
Yeah, David wanted to know.
Yeah, it's you know what? Unfortunately, the way this thing looks with the number of shares, etc.
So for those of you who don't know, we do have a live chat room from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. You get to it through YouTube. You can just look for Midas Letter and find the live show, or check out the website, midasletter.com, and the live show is there every day, Monday through Friday. And just like we're doing now, we can take a look at one of your stocks you want us to check out, and Ed will do his best to tell you what to do or not to do.
Look at Juju. Juju was up to 28 a year ago. Look at this. This thing was 25, 28, 30 cents, crapped out, rallied a bit, and it's just grinding.
Just going sideways.
Sideways to slightly lower.
Yeah.
It's seems like it's grinding its way to oblivion. And again, I'm not trying to. There's nothing about this chart that would make me go out and buy it. I'm just looking at the chart, not commenting on the company.
Yeah.
And I want to say that always. When you're looking at charts, you're trying to just, hey, this is the price action information. Act accordingly.
That's all you can really go on when you're looking at charts.
Let's look at one there that's really had a big move in the last couple of days. And we've had this gentleman on the show. It's Ignite. And BILZ is the ticker. Just 1 second.
Okay.
BILZ. Yeah, $2.10. Now look at this. So this is a relatively new company, and the gentleman, I think his name is Bilzerian. He's been on the show.
Dan Bilzerian.
Yeah. He's a real interesting, colorful character,
Yeah,
and
he's made quite the name for himself.
look at this. Look at this. I'm gonna just a second here. Let me put this. Come on, don't fail me. I wonder why that works. Sometimes it doesn't work.
It's definitely the pen. No? Okay, well, what can we see without looking at it?
Well,
without using your pen?
let's just yeah. So
you can just comment on it.
We had a big move, then a correction, and now all of a sudden, from $1.20 2 weeks ago, we had $2.60 today. In this market, that is phenomenal. Why, I don't know, but it hit $2.60. It's backed off to $2.10. Keep in mind, yesterday morning it was $1.40. Like this is the kind of action we saw 6 months, 9 months ago in a lot of these issuers.
Is that a gap open there?
Well, it did gap open because it opened way up in here.
Yeah.
Okay, and wait a minute. There we go. See, you gotta wait a bit. It gapped open, closed here. I think it opened here, 250. Can you imagine? You sold it on the close at $1.90. You wake up and it's 250. You're thinking, what the hell did I do that for? But it's backed off, so we got a red candle, right?
Yeah.
It may gap in the morning again. This kind of action, might entice some shorts to come in, especially in a shitty market.
Yeah.
Got to be careful. You got to know what you're doing if you're
looks
playing
like one to watch.
Look at the volume though. Look at this big volume. That tells you something, right?
Yeah.
You get this monster volume, big move, maybe the end of the move, and we're having trouble. So far, we're having trouble getting over that high. But if it gets through there, you never know. Maybe this thing is going to run to $3 or $4. I don't know.
Okay. Well, let's keep an eye on it.
All right.
Next up, Alessandro Bruno joins me, and we're going to talk about why investors should buy gold.
Let's talk about Aurora. Recently, your financials, you've more or less delivered on
Here are the headlines moving markets today.
If you're lucky to buy it 3 days ago at 37 cents,
and I think it has a lot to do with some of these smaller names giving really...
Recreational cannabis is here. It's quite dry. So I'm going to eliminate the stocky bits.
Welcome back. My guest today is our Chief Financial Writer, Alessandro Bruno. Welcome.
Thank you.
So lots happening in the news. Where would you like to start?
Well, one thing that's definitely grabbed my attention in the past week or so are the alleged drone strikes against the Saudi oil facilities and processing plant, the famous Hudrais field, which is the biggest oil field in Saudi Arabia.
The drone strikes.
The drone strikes.
That's big news.
Yeah.
And it's been affecting the markets.
It's been affecting the markets, but I don't think people quite understand how important those attacks are and how many sectors in the markets they affect. It's
So
not
let's
just
talk
about
about
oil. It's a lot about gold, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to talk about it more, but to me the signal that for investors to take note is buy more gold, because the main effect of this strike has been to increase tensions worldwide.
So
and we can
tensions
discuss why.
are up as a result of the attack.
Yes.
So what does this mean moving forward?
Well, let's go back a bit.
Sure.
The drone strikes themselves, because it's still unclear who is responsible for the strike. The Americans, now the British, and perhaps even the French, I'm not sure who else has joined in, have signed the document suggesting that they believe the Iranians are behind the attack. And Iran certainly has an antagonistic relationship with Saudi Arabia and would love to show the Saudis that they have the weapons and ability to evade their radar systems and defense systems, billions of dollars worth of defense systems that the Saudis buy every year from the Americans. At the same time, it seems to me that the president of Iran, in particular Rouhani, has no interest in stirring the pot right now, because all indications were that he was looking for an arrangement with Trump, perhaps a new nuclear deal. And right now, the UN General Assembly has started, where all world leaders come to meet, including those of countries that are not US allies. They come to the United States. They're limited in their movements, but they come to the UN. So there was the potential of a meeting between the two. One of the signals, and we discussed that, I believe, last week, one of the signals that the Iranians could have understood as a sign of openness was the firing of John Bolton. Now, he's been replaced by another neoconservative and anti-Iran and anti-Iraq official as security advisor, but perhaps in a milder one that more malleable by Trump. One of the problems with Bolton was that he couldn't be controlled. He was like a loose cannon.
So all of this, how does it relate to the investors in gold?
Yes, well, yeah, to go back, we have those initial, the firing of Bolton, the potential opening of a discussion between the United States and Iran and a new nuclear deal was putting pressure on gold prices down. In fact, What did we see last week? The gold price of gold went below 1,500 for the first time in a few weeks. Mm-hmm. Now, the causes were not necessarily attributed just to Iran, but I have to say the timing was very propitious for that kind of thinking. And then we have the attacks. I believe it was September the 17th or 18th. Anyway, last week, the drones attacked this oil field. All of a sudden, the big expectation is for the oil price to shoot up. In fact, I believe some people expected oil prices to go up to $100 a barrel, $120 a barrel. We're talking numbers we haven't seen since the huge spike in oil prices of 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. There were hedge funds lined up. For some reason they knew they were ready to pounce on this opportunity. But the oil prices did spike. I don't think they even reached, though, $70 a barrel. So what's going on? What was the more important
they're artificially low?
Artificially low, or perhaps someone is artificially boosting the importance of the oil field, the processing plant, how much it actually counts, and how much production the Saudis are actually capable of delivering.
So gold should be, or gold.
But yeah, what happened though? The oil prices shot up and then quickly started to come down. In fact, today they're at $58, $59 a barrel. And I'm being optimistic. In other words, they're back down to normal, no spike. I think a lot of savvy investors and who have become suspicious.
So who is the big winner in all this?
Gold.
Gold.
Yeah.
Now,
because what we have left, what's left over, if we look at the dust of the attack, apart from the rubble, which will be quickly rebuilt, the Saudis are unclear on how long it will take to rebuild the facility and to restore production to normal levels. But I think they'll be ready to go faster than they say.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the defense stocks that have benefited from this.
Yeah, I think if you look at gold, you'll notice that it's up to 1539, 1537 today. Quite a nice price, because as I mentioned, what's left over are tensions between Iran, the United States, Saudi Arabia. There is definitely the appearance that some kind of attack, some kind of a war will occur. It seems like Trump, just like the Godfather in Godfather 3, he's being pulled back in. Every time he tries to get out, he's being pulled back into the quagmire. And his America's biggest allies, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates, the biggest allies in the region, want Iran's military capability neutralized. Which brings us to the defense stocks. Sometimes, if oil goes up, always take a look at defense stocks, because there's a good chance that they're up as well. And in fact, we checked the charts a few minutes ago.
Yeah, there was a gap opening in Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Martin had a huge gap opening right around the time of the drone attack. The other one that showed a very similar pattern was Raytheon. What does Raytheon make? The Patriot missile. And who has that? Saudi Arabia. Israel does, but Saudi Arabia in this case. And the Patriot missile is the anti-missile missile. It's the one that should have been triggered by the drones.
The anti-missile missile.
Yes,
so this is a missile to shoot down
other missiles and
okay.
other incoming weapon systems. It should have worked.
So you're saying the missile didn't work?
Yeah.
So then I would have thought that Raytheon is negatively affected by a missile that doesn't work.
It is, but somehow they will sell more, because Saudi Arabia only buys from the United States. So they will sell more systems.
So sorry, your missile didn't work, and now we place an order for a few more?
The Raytheon Patriot has been controversial since years ago. It was first tested during the first Gulf War in the 1990s, in 1991.
So you're saying this should never have happened because there's fail-safes in place that protect these facilities?
That's the mystery around these drone attacks. It's very odd that the Houthi rebels in Yemen claimed responsibility for the attacks. Now they claimed responsibility. They wanted to show the Saudis that they have the capability of hitting them where it hurts most, their biggest oil facility. At the same time, the precision of the attack is questionable. It makes that claim questionable. I understand why people don't believe it, because nobody got killed, nobody got even wounded. They were so precise. They struck exactly where they needed to strike. They knew exactly where to go. The damage is incredible. Military precision, but also high-tech precision with asymmetric warfare capabilities. Now, Iran had no interest in launching these attacks because their prospects were actually favorable. They need a deal. They need a deal to free the country from sanctions, at least some of the sanctions, so that their economy can be picked up, because the Iranian regime is under pressure domestically because of the downturn in the economy. So that was actually the idea. That's the idea behind the sanctions in the first place, is to get the people angry at the government and revolt. That history has proven does not work, but the country is still under pressure. So the government of Iran does want to alleviate the situation. They want another deal, and the attacks block the other deal. The talks look unlikely now. They've raised oil prices temporarily, perhaps just enough to keep a break-even point for producers like Saudi Arabia. For example, Iran can produce oil at a lower price. So even when oil prices at $50 or even $40, they're still making something of a profit. The Saudis make less of a profit because they have to dig deeper into to extract the oil. The Iranian oil is closer to the surface. So the biggest beneficiaries, gold, and defense stocks. as we mentioned, the defense stocks. This situation that we have now has created enough tension to last for a few months to sustain the defense stocks, because now the talk is about a potential war.
So what indicators should investors be looking for in the next months, weeks, that may trigger either a buy or sell?
Oh, well, look carefully what's going to happen at the UN General Assembly.
Okay.
Because whatever Trump's speech, if he speaks, or American officials, and what Iranian officials say, and what the Saudis say at the UN, watch very carefully, because they will be, as some people say, fighting words. They're going to. There's not going to be any reconciliation happening in the next couple of weeks, or perhaps even months. So that will keep the tensions high, and that will keep the defense stocks high. The defense stocks, judging by the chart, are at their year-to-date high. They haven't, even Boeing, with all the huge problems it has with the Boeing 737 MAX, and more problems have come out related to the plane. Boeing yesterday opened the fund to start compensating families that lost people in the 2 crashes earlier this year. Even Boeing is at $375 a share. So it's still much closer to its record high than it is to a low.
So we should be paying attention to what Trump says?
Pay attention to what Trump says, pay attention to what Rouhani says, pay attention to what Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who's probably going to be in New York, pay attention to what happens with the Israeli government. It's unclear who the prime minister will be. Is it Netanyahu, who's a total... He made several speeches at the UN condemning Iran in the past. Will he be the one to speak now? He's outgoing, and he's got a number of personal legal issues to deal with if he is demoted from the job, because their election the results were unclear. They need to form coalitions, and that's what's happening right now. But I think for the next few weeks, if not months, the tensions will be high enough to keep both gold investors and defense stock investors very happy.
Okay. I wanted to ask you a little bit about what's going on in Ukraine. Have you been following that?
With Biden?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have been following that. Very interesting.
What does it mean for the markets?
Well, I don't know what it means for the markets, other than it's a new problem for Trump.
Okay.
Yeah. So
another new problem.
A new problem for Trump. In this case, Trump is accused of colluding with the very president that was put in by, let's call it, to simplify things, Obama in 2014 in the Maidan protests. So I'm not. The allegations are, by the way, quite damning for Biden and Biden's son in particular. He's involved in some shady oil deals in eastern Ukraine, and Biden apparently made threats, or I'm not quite sure of the situation, but he's involved in, I don't want to be liable, but he's involved in a shady deal in trying to protect his son's business dealings in Ukraine. So all of a sudden we have the Democrats moving to impeach Trump, because now they've got, after claiming that Trump colluded with Russian officials to get elected, now that he's colluded with Ukraine, the Ukrainian president, to hurt Biden's interests and to damage Biden's campaign.
And essentially is holding Ukraine hostage to try to help him? Is that
yes,
the idea?
But Ukraine is not going to be affected. Actually, Ukraine is moving in a very interesting direction. Ukraine and Russia are starting to talk much more. Certainly the relationship is much better than it was 5 years ago. And in fact, the new president, who is an actor, is a comedian who had his own show pretending to be the president.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, actually, you can see the series on Netflix, by the way.
I'll check that out.
Yeah.
What's it called? Do you remember?
Hello, Mr. President, I think. Privyet, but that's will be Russian. But
Gotcha.
Zelensky is the actor, the comedian. He won the election in Ukraine with a mandate to seek better relations with Russia, because Ukraine and Russia, when they have the tensions are deep, it's not good for the markets. It's not good for business in either country. It's not, apart from all the other things, it's not good for. They're very close neighbors. And I mean, there are companies that, because of the Soviet nature, I mean, they were split up, but they still have a symbiotic relationship. For example, one of Ukraine's biggest companies, Antonov. Do you know Antonov?
No.
Well, you should. Antonov makes the biggest plane in the world.
Okay.
The Miria. It's 6-engine transport plane that makes the jumbo jet look like a Cessna.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are a lot of shared interests and shared waterways and like the strategic, like Crimea, which was in dispute for, well, actually never in dispute. It was a gift by Khrushchev to Ukrainians. Khrushchev was one of the Soviet leaders in the 60s. He was Ukrainian descent. He gave Crimea to the Ukraine at that time. He was a little bit tipsy. I heard the story. He was drunk and a bit euphoric, and he decided, at the time though, they didn't know that the Soviet Union was going to dissolve like that in 1990. So the tensions have remained, but I don't know if this is a strange effort to revive the Russiagate scandal, which seemed to have faded away, and certainly Ukraine is going to be back into the news, but for different reasons. Now it's going to be Biden, and Biden seems to be the strongest. It seems to be the U.S. candidate with the strongest support.
Right.
In the Democratic Party. So the Democrats are rallying behind him. Now, how many? Because there are other potential candidates who would be, in my opinion, better for the country than stale senator and former vice president. So that's another situation which it could definitely contribute to certainly to the gold price, because it makes it can, so long as Trump's presidency is unstable, it will keep gold well above what the average price we've seen in the past few years.
Great. Well, it all sounds really interesting. Really appreciate your time, Alessandro.
Thank you.
And we'll keep an eye on everything.
Yes, keep an eye on everything, because especially in the next 2 weeks.
Coming up next, I have a conversation with the CEO of Sensi Properties, Daniel Sachs.
If you're enjoying the show, subscribe to Midas Letter on YouTube so you stay up to date on everything investment.
Welcome back. My guest today is none other than Daniel Sachs, CEO of Sensi Properties. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess we've come very full circle.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So happy to have you here.
Started at our first job together. I think that was my real first job post-university.
Yeah, so Xerox, many years ago. A lot of good friends still from the old copier days.
Yeah, the only thing no one wants to buy is a photocopier.
Well, people do want marijuana now, so you've entered an interesting space. Can you tell us a little bit about your business and what you're doing at Sensi?
Sure, yeah. I'm a real estate guy. My background was in that space and have done some kind of angel investing and venture capital over the years. And moved back to Toronto about almost 4 years ago and started looking at cannabis. A friend of mine was working as a stockbroker at GMP and called me up and was like, hey, you should be paying attention to cannabis. The more I looked at it from a real estate perspective, the less sense it made to me as what was going on at that time.
Is that where Sensi
Yeah, that's kind of where Sensi came about. It was late 2016. I invested in a couple companies, one of which was CanTrust when it was private through meeting Eric Paul, which is now an interesting thing to say as we've come full circle on a lot of issues. But the way companies were approaching their capital at that time really made no sense from a real estate perspective. They were raising very expensive cost of capital equity, 30-40% cost of capital equity, and diluting down their shareholders to buy real estate that they didn't need to own in the first place. So I tried to finance a number of properties through my old job where I was arranging financing for people. There was no market appetite with lenders. And so I launched Sensi Properties a little over 2 years ago as the first cannabis real estate investment company in Canada to help provide non-dilutive capital to these companies by either acquiring their facilities and leasing them back to them in a sale-leaseback transaction or financing the developments. That's evolved over the past couple of years as the market has matured.
So can you tell me a little bit about what you like about the work you're doing? Interested to know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm eternally fascinated by the cannabis space. It continues to move at an incredibly quick pace. I mean, I think that pace is somewhat lessened over the past couple months as we've entered into this market doldrum. But, the speed from a regulatory perspective, news perspective, it was going at a breakneck pace for the past couple of years, and that was extremely fascinating to me. The more I learn about the plant from medicinal properties and that kind of facet of it, I find very interesting, and just the business opportunity and figuring out how to navigate through this mess of an industry from a regulatory perspective and everything else is just eternally fascinating. I mean, I wake up every day and I'm excited to be in this industry because it's so challenging and so fun and so new.
Good to get up every day excited.
Yeah, for sure.
How has the market been receptive to your ideas?
Yeah, I think it's been an evolution as so real estate deals in the cannabis space compete with all other types of capital, right? So as investment banks were very liquid, previous to launching my business, it had been very dead for capital raising. And so it was a really great time to launch the business. And then when I launched the business, the fundraising from a bank level just exploded. So people could raise overnight, they could raise $30 million in a day. And so it became very hard to compete at that time. So there wasn't quite as much resonance of the message, and it was a harder kind of uphill battle. And then as the market tapered off, that changed. Then, banks came into it. It's an evolution. If you look around, though, at other mature industries, the operators don't own the real estate. The movement of the real estate off the books of these cannabis companies is an inevitability. It's not a question. It's just going to end up there.
So would you say what you're doing is more important now than it was, say, 2 years ago? Or how does it play as far as timing goes?
I would say so. I would say I was probably a little early in the market. I was the first in the market, and I think people thought I was a little insane.
First, right?
Yeah, people thought I was a little insane when I started it. But
well, you can always say you're first. That's a good one.
There you go. Yeah. No, it's becoming more and more prevalent as a form of financing, especially as it becomes harder and harder to justify raising capital to put into real estate for these companies as we move from a market which is based on, hype, let's call that, like funded capacity and all these other terms that were kind of out there, all these other metrics, to something that's more EBITDA based and earnings based and operational execution.
Okay. Now, as far as the future of real estate, maybe you want to speculate. What are we looking at?
From a cannabis perspective? Or?
Yeah.
I think we're going to see, there were a lot of, we're going to see more and more financings happen in the space. You can see at a larger macro trend, there's more players entering the space, especially in the US. It's starting to become pretty crowded. You had MedMen spinning off their Treehouse REIT. You had Acreage, I think, spun out one of theirs. And a couple of the other MSOs have spun out large REITs. Inception REITs raising a REIT in the States. So there's a larger prevalence of that. Within Canada, you've seen this evolution, right? So everything was about indoor and let's call it sub 40,000 square feet when I was first looking at the space. Then it became indoor, and you had to be like 300,000 square feet of indoor. That was the thing. Then it moved to greenhouse, and it was like you're going to be, okay, we're a 400,000 square foot greenhouse. We're going to be competitive. Now it's, okay, we got to be a 2 million square foot greenhouse. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, cultivation is, the banks are coming out, and Matt Bottomley from Canaccord came out and said basically cultivation is dead in Canada, and you saw this pivot, and it's like, okay, cultivation no longer matters. We're building out this extraction facility. We're building out a beverage facility. And so the uses of real estate, of how these users are approaching space changed. I think one of the other macro trends you're seeing, and there's been this great story of community revitalization, right? As they've gone in, and you look at what Canopy did in rehabilitating the Hershey's factory and a town like Smith Falls. The other side to that is it's really hard to finance those properties because they are in small towns, right? If you built if you built $100 million factory or a $300 million factory in a town where the next nearest most expensive property is like $10 million, it's pretty hard for a lender to look at that and be like, okay, this value makes sense, because if that tenant's no longer there, then it's arguable that that property is only worth $5 or $10 million bucks, even if you've put 300 million into it. And so that's kind of one of the challenges. And the other thing we're seeing in that trend is these companies are having a challenge scaling their labor forces in these small markets. So I think over time you're going to see...
Not everyone wants to live in a small town with
like
just the other employees of the company?
Leamington has already eaten up like all available labor in that area, right? And the pace at which, unless they're able to replace all these jobs with automation, which they're not, because it's, as you know, cannabis is like a very high skilled, requires like a highly skilled labor force, a lot of PhDs and stuff like that. You've got to keep attracting more people to that town. And I think you're just going to see more and more facilities, as new facilities are built, move towards urban markets, right? It was a bit of a chicken and egg thing before, where companies couldn't get financing, so they found cheap land and cheap buildings in faraway places. And now in today's market, I think it's a lot about, how can we create a sustainable business? Where is the right place to locate? The same way any company would look at it, any modern company would look at it. Where do we want to locate? Where we can be competitive? And where we're often competitive, you look at like the whole Amazon fiasco with their whole search for a new headquarters. It was about a highly educated workforce, a flow of employees, of services and other things. And I think you're going to find that in major markets. And that will inure to the benefit of the real estate players, because it's obviously easier to finance something or raise capital for a deal in Toronto than it is to raise capital in nowhere, Ontario.
It's not the old build it and they will come out to the middle of nowhere and work for you.
Yeah.
Or you'll have to pay them quite a bit more probably.
It's a challenge. I've looked at a number of properties that are in kind of small markets, and on a deal perspective, it looked really good. It's like, you've got this really cheap building, maybe we could do something, and you scratch your head and you're talking to the LPs, and it's like, well, how are we going to staff this thing?
Right. Unless it's up in cottage country, then...
There you go, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Well, I think you'll see smaller lifestyle businesses excel there, and people will be able... There are companies that are able to solve the staffing challenges, but for some, it's a fundamental problem, right? Like, if you can't staff a business...
That's an issue,
that's
for
an
sure.
Issue, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the companies you invest in?
Yeah. So outside of like the real estate side, I've invested in a number of companies in the cannabis space. I guess the first was CannTrust. At that point, looked like the most promising medical company in the world. Obviously, we've seen what's happened to that.
It's taking a little turn.
My timing was not bad on it, but
that's good.
Outside of that, I've invested in Strain Print Technologies, which is a medical technology company for tracking efficacy for cannabis. So they have an app, the Strain Print app, and users can track their cannabis sessions, and allows them to use cannabis more wisely. At the same time, they've built the largest medical database of medical data in the cannabis space, and they're able to help companies approach clinical trials and research more effectively. Yeah, Strain Print Technologies.
Okay.
It's a Toronto-based company. Another one is Boozer or Super. Boozer or Super is Boozer is an alcohol delivery platform. They partner with Foodora nationally to deliver alcohol, and Super is the cannabis end of that. So it's a digital marketplace, an app-based marketplace.
They deliver cannabis to your door.
Yeah, so they're within a legal, regulated way.
Right.
There's lots of services that do it illegally right now, but they'll be rolling it out, I believe, first in Manitoba and Saskatchewan.
Sounds good. Sounds like some companies to check out.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll just wrap up with what are your thoughts on the whole vaping issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge, obviously.
Yeah.
I think it's something the industry is going to have to navigate. There's a number of problems with it. One, I would say, is you've got this drive for companies to outsource all these parts to China. So most of the vape hardware is made in China. So aside from batch testing a single one and sending it to a third-party lab to be verified, they have no idea what's in this hardware. There's been lots of documented cases of stuff including heavy metals in there and lead and mercury, stuff you don't want to be inhaling. I had a chat with a large tobacco company about maybe 8 months ago, and they were telling me about all the additives that a lot of their competitors used in vaping, like the clouds, when you see people puffing these big clouds
you see them.
of nicotine vape.
Saw one this morning.
Yeah, a lot of that. So that's like the same stuff they put in smoke machines. And that's
Really?
And that's like what gives
I wouldn't
you
stand
like,
in front of a smoke machine for very
and
long.
inhale it. No, yeah, like that's the same thing that gives you popcorn lung, essentially. And all of these additives that are made, like the e-juice, is made in China, right? And it's heavily commoditized, so it's not about creating a quality product for people. So I think it's a real problem, and cannabis companies are going to have to be thoughtful in their approach to separate themselves from that, and to ensure that there is, because right now vaping's pretty unregulated on the nicotine side.
Right, the wild west
Wild
of vaping.
West, yeah. So on the cannabis side, I think if you don't want to get dragged down in that mess, you're going to have to be very prudent as to how you approach it and show that like what you're creating as a product is very clean and is kind of well designed.
Okay, well that's all the time we have on the show today.
Perfect.
SensiProperties.com. Daniel, really appreciate your time, and I look forward to doing this again.
Thank you, Mark. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, there we have it. Not a lot of time left, but pretty interesting guy, that Dan.
Yeah.
Known him for many
Looks
years.
like he's got himself an idea that he can do something with.
Yeah. Well, he's doing something with it.
So I thought I'd put up the HMMJ chart, which I've got up now. This is a 2-year chart, and this is the Horizon ETF Cannabis. Now, I'm just going to make some general comments, but it's been bloody. Here we are. We got a top in here. Remember, this is over 2 years. This top lower. Okay, that's significant because especially when you look at what happened. Okay, so that and then you got some support, Sapporo, and then here we are. We've breached these levels. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to continue. We may have another rally here. We may have a 50% rally from and claw back that, because we're starting to see some candles that suggest oversold, nervousness. And that's where you go in. If you wait till the thing to move to go up and you get in and you feel good, you're buying high, wrong feeling. So marijuana stocks still taking on a lot of water, aren't they?
Yeah.
S&P.
Well, when people are
Yeah.
thinking it's scary out there, then maybe, you know,
Be
you go
fearful.
against the grain.
Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful.
Yep.
So that's what we're going to do.
Well, it's 4 o'clock.
Is it 4 o'clock?
It's 4 o'clock.
Okay. Do you know where your co-host is?
My co-host, you, Ed?
Right here. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
Okay.